a little bit about file input and output and show you how you can use streams in C++ to do input and output to a file in the same way we do it to the standard. We do standard input and standard output using cin and cout. So to do this, we're going to be overloading the operators for the angle brackets. If you remember, for cout we usually use this, and cin we usually use this. So we'll be overloading those two operators for file. So in order to do this, we need to actually make sure we include the file IO library, right? Correct? Yeah. So what is the file IO library? Anyone know? Well, if IO stream is the input-output library for standard input-output, what do you think the file stream? It's actually just fstream, but it's similar name, right? Now we could actually, let's also include string here because I want to use strings. Easiest thing to do first is let's create a file, an output file. So let's create something where we write something, okay? And maybe what we should do is actually, what would be a good way of doing this? Do you think if we create a little loop where we have somebody type in stuff, we'll output it automatically to the file? Does that sound good? Okay. So how would I create a loop to get somebody to input lines of text? We're not going to do anything with the file yet. I just want to get the input first. So what I'm going to do is, just to keep things simple, I'm going to use an array of strings. So I'm going to use a string, we'll call it input. I'm going to have 10 lines of text, or let's do 5 lines of text, okay? And what I'm just going to do is I'm going to use a for loop here for int I equals 0, I is less than what? Right. I'm just going to basically, first I'm going to say cout, enter in 5 lines of text to store in a file. Okay? Oh, should I ask what the file name is too, or do you want to do that, or just set it default? What were you going to say? You could. So what I've done here is I've hard-coded the 5, right, and the 5 here. So what you could also do is there's different things you can do. So you can do size of an array, but if you want to use a number repeatedly, so we'll probably end up using this 5 again, right? So we can also, there's different things we can do. One of them is we can actually look at things and use, for example, length or size for an object to do it. We can also, if we want, we can also use set size. If we know we're going to use it in a number of different ways, we could say size equals 5 here and then just say this is size and this is size. I'm just going to keep it simple right now and just do that. But that's a good practice because now if we wanted to change this to 10, we just have to change it in one spot, right? What? So we'll just change that to, right? Works? Okay. I'm also going to get the file name. I'm going to call it the output file, out file. And for this, I'm going to cin out file, okay? Make sense for the file? So the first thing we're doing is we have 3 variables. One of them is the size. One of them is the input and the output. Now we could also make the size constant too, couldn't we? So we could do const int size. And then we would just adjust here size, do this capitalized. I could do a find and replace, but I'll just type them out. It's fine because there's only 4 places. Okay. So we have a constant integer size, which is the size of our array of input strings, and we have an out file. What we're first doing is we're saying enter in the name of the output file where you want to store the stuff somebody's going to type in. We'll take that in. We're not doing any error checking or anything for this because we're just keeping it simple for in class. I will cover for you later how we can do checking to make sure, like, what if somebody enters in a string. For example, in certain operating systems, certain characters aren't allowed in a file name, right? And so I'll show you how to actually check for those things at a later date. So after we get the file name, we're going to get the actual lines of text that you want to store in the file. Now, what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to simply store each of those. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a C in here, input I, right? And so that's just going to loop through and store them. Okay? Now, I could actually, I don't even have to store them in an array technically, because I could actually go and just write them directly to a file, but I'm doing it this way because I want to show you an array as well as show you file. So I'm going to just do in a separate loop, I'm going to actually do writing out to the file. But we could have done it straight from the console to the file. We'll see. I'll do that after just to show you. So again, let's do another int, I equals 0, I is less than size. And in this case here now, we want to write to a stream. But we haven't actually created any stream, have we? So probably what we should do is up here, after we get in the output file, let's create the stream. So we're going to create an output file stream. And we create it by actually going OF stream, because unlike CIN and COUT, there's really only one terminal, right? Or one standard input and standard output. We don't have to name it anything. It's COUT or CIN. We could have multiple files that we're writing to, right? Right. So what we're going to do here is OF. I'm going to create a new OF stream called, let's just call it my stream, okay? And I'm going to do, I could do this, my stream dot open and the out file name, okay? So that'll open an output stream. Make sense? Now, you could also as well, instead of doing those two lines, you could just create the OF stream called my stream and actually put in brackets behind it the name of the file, and it'll open it automatically. So this line here is the same as the two commented lines below. Does anyone have a question about that? And well, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to change this a little bit more, and I'm going to call it my odd stream. Because what I'm going to actually do here is I'm going to start at line 1 while I is less than size. I'm going to increase it by what? I'm only going to output the odd lines of text. Not because it has any value in this context, but just because it just to show you just a little bit of a variation on what we were doing. So, if we have this output file stream, how would we normally do output? If we wanted to display out the odd lines to the command line, we would just go cout what? Right? And this would display out the output lines, right? And I'll just put a cout here. Let's just try this out first. The other thing I want to mention, though, is I'm going to comment out this file for now. I'm just going to do this command line and just show you what's happening in command line, and then we'll switch it over to do it as a file. So what we have now is this input file. We're not going to bother with this yet. Sorry, I should have probably not bothered with it. We're just going to say enter in 5 lines of text, and we're going to output the odd lines back to the command line again. Okay? So let's actually compile this. It's called fileio _ ex1.cpp. Is it going to compile? Yes. So if I actually run it, I can enter in text. Hello. And it outputted them right here. Now, it did a little bit funny. What did it do that we didn't? What did it forget to do? We didn't put end lines here, did we, right? So it actually got the odd lines, which was did it? Well, no, we actually started with 1. So really, we should have started with 0, I guess. And we could have done the first line to third line. Because remember, our numbering starts that way. Where even the index of 0 is the first line. The index of 2 is the third line, and so on. So let's change that, and let's just do this again. Output odd lines to command line. My is. Oh, I forgot to compile it. That would have helped, right? Oops. Let me compile it. And what does it display out? Hello, name Jeremy, right? Cool. Now, what we actually wanted this to do, though, was we didn't actually care about, that just shows us how cout works. Well, it turns out the cool thing about the output file streams is really, once we create the stream by doing this up here, OF stream, we create a new output file stream called my odd stream right here that writes to the file, whatever file we type in. What we can then do is down here for cout, all we have to do to write to this is change cout to my odd stream. And it will now output those lines of text to the file. So basically, output to a file is the same as output to the command line. And once you actually, the one difference though is that because we opened the file and we wrote to it, once we're done, we actually have to do what, do you think? What do we have to do after? Close it. So we actually can do it by doing this. We just close the file right here. And instead we'll do output odd lines to file instead. Okay? Sound good? And if we wanted, we could even have a little bit of a, let's keep track of this. So we could actually see out here little dots every time it outputs something. Right? Could we? And then cout. So outputting odd lines to file, file writing complete. I'm going to put an end line here so this writes it on the new line. So, does anyone want, let's see this run. Does anyone have any questions about the code before I run it? What? Okay, so the includes here were fstream, which is for file stream, and string, which is what we're using because we have an array of strings. And what we've done here is we're going to enter the output file name. The person's going to type it in. We're going to use that out file name to create a new output file stream. We're going to get 5 lines of text, and then we're going to output the odd ones, lines 1, 3, and 5, to the odd stream. And once we're done, we're going to close that stream. Yes?
Do we have a file name that we're going to use?
We are going to create the file. So whatever file name we give it here, it will. This OF stream, my odd stream, is the same as creating a stream and opening it. So it will open. It'll create it for us. Yeah.
And when we, for example, if we have to path our stream, is it backslashes or forward slashes?
We're going to get there. We're going to get to. So right now what this will do is this will, by default, we're only going to enter in the name of the file. It will store the file in the same directory that we're running the program in. If you want to include the directory path, We will talk about that a little later, but I just want to build up from this example as opposed to put everything in at once. Are we okay if I run this now? Yeah.
Question. Why are we inputting to I instead of input? When I is less than size, does that automatically set I equal to size?
Oh, you mean right here, this for loop, or do you mean here?
For the for loop, like it's Y outstream then input I. Why don't we have an input? Oh.
Input is the name of the array.
Oh, right. Sorry,
So maybe I should have called this data, and then I called this data. Yeah, maybe it's confusing if you use the word input. It's the user input that's going to be the file output. So let's just call it data, and that should make it a little simpler. Okay, let me just try to compile and run this, and we'll see. I'll answer further questions after. So to compile G++ file IO, we're going to compile this. And it compiles for me. And then I'm going to actually just run it, and then I'll actually answer some more questions.
So basically in C++ 11 they added overload to the open and the load stream constructor to take std string.
Yeah.
So but it's not finding that definition. So assuming it's not using C++ 11 and wants to use like a character pointer.
Okay. So one thing I do want to mention, coming back here, I just paused for a second to answer some questions, technical questions. There were some students who had some issues with the outfile stream using an older G++. So we did outfile.cstring to resolve that issue. But if you're using C++ 11 or forward, then you're fine. So one thing that did come up when I took a break was the comment that this is technically not lines of text. In fact, what we're actually asking is we're entering in words to store in a file. And that's because if we actually typed out a line of text with spaces in it, the space is actually a separator character, and it will read in every word on the same line as a separate string. And there is a way to get around this where we can do full lines of text, but in the interest of time, I don't want to actually get into that. But we will talk about that a little bit later in the course. I want to keep things simple and focused on files for now, as opposed to handling input. Okay, so just to get back, what I've done here is, let me just actually end this. I'll recompile it with here, and we'll run it. So what we want to do is enter in the file, right? So let's just call this example1.txt, okay? So that's the name of our file. So we're going to enter in 5 words. Right? And then it output odd lines. And I use dots here, so it actually means every time I outputted something, I used a dot. So that means it outputted 3 things, which makes sense, right? Now, we could go in our file directory and see if it's there, but we can also see if something is here in our command line by typing what? ls. And do we see that file there? There it is, example 1. Now, if we wanted to see the text of it, what could we type here? We could type cat. So if we go cat example 1, it will display out the contents of that file to the screen. So there's our file right there, right? Hello, name Jeremy. Cool. So that file worked. We just wrote a file. Awesome, right? Now, what about input? Well, say we wanted to read that file back in and display it out. Okay? Let's go back to our code now. Actually, I'll just adjust this size back down. Okay, so let's go back into our code. Up there we did the output. Now let's actually create an input file stream. And for the input file stream, I'm going to create, it's an IF stream as opposed to an OF stream for output. And for the input file here, I'm going to use the same name that we used up here, this out file. Okay? I'm going to open up the out file again, and I'm going to read from it. Yeah, and if you're doing this on an older version, you can do this and it'll work. Okay, so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to read the file in. So I'm going to say, so I'm going to do read from the file. And after I read from the file, I'm going to close the file. So I'm going to just write that code first. So I'm going to do input file. Oh, what am I doing here? Sorry, input file dot close. Perfect. And that'll close the file. And now I want to read in between. So at this point, this could be, I want to write this general. I don't want to assume that I know there's 3 lines of text in here. What I'd rather do is write, what? Yeah, so what I'd rather do is I'd rather just read as much as there is in the file. So I'm going to use a while loop here because I don't know how many iterations I'm going to have to do. I'm going to say while not input file dot EOF. What do you think EOF stands for?
End of file.
End of file, exactly. While not end of file, I am going to take the input file and get its content. So I'm going to actually create a string here. I'm going to say, let's call it line. And I'm going to say input file. I'm going to get the line of text. And then what I'm going to do, just to see, I'm going to output that line of text to a file. Or not to a file, sorry, to the output. Okay? So let's actually see what happens here. I'll actually add a comment as well up top here. Before I open the input file stream, I'm going to just add a comment that says cout. So I'm going to read in that file. Okay? So let's give this a try. Compile it, it works. We'll enter in a file name, example1.txt. Now if we write this file in, what's going to happen to the file? It's actually going to overwrite it. So it's going to, the way it's set up right now, we're going to write over the contents of what we had. Yep?
So what if does it matter if you don't specify a file extension?
No, I could call it example1 and it'll work. I just did .text, doesn't matter. So I'm just going to do this instead this time. 4, 5, and what happened? I did that, then it outputted the odd lines to the file, then it read in the example1 and outputted 1, 3, 5, and 5. What? What happened here? Yeah?
Did you assume that the line was just going to be 5 and it printed out again?
The last one it printed out, what happened? It read 5, wasn't at the end of file, right? Is that what you're going to say?
Yeah, it still had line declared as 5. By the time it ran through and realized it was in the file, but it still does that.
Right. So it actually, when it read 5, it didn't get to end of file, right? Then it tried to read another line again. It couldn't. Why? Because it was at the end of file. And it displayed out 5 twice. So there's, I mean, one simple thing to do here is, which is really simple, is just reset this to nothing. So that way there won't be anything to print at the end. But that's really a hack. So there is a way of resolving this properly. Any thoughts? Yeah? You want to do a do while loop? So you were going to say, what you were suggesting is do this. Is that what you were suggesting? Yeah. There's an issue with this. What if the file's empty? Right? I mean, we can try it. And I'll do example 1 with no extension, just Spencer?
Yeah.
So you can see. And it displayed at 1, 3, 5, and 5. It still didn't fix the problem, did it? And I did recompile it. So let's go back here.
Isn't streamlined like a different, like a word or like numbers?
So what if we set the string line to something different? So if we did this here, what I just did, just 1 second here, if we did this, it works, but it displays an extra blank line, right? So, what?
Like at the start, like when you call your string line, you put an answer in there. Where you define it.
Where?
Right up there, string line, and then you provide it right there. Yeah. What if you like needed something else and left that empty? Would that work?
I mean, we could also do this if we put this in here. But again, if we did a string and we redefine it every time, that works, right? But it still prints out the empty line. So I'm actually going to leave that, because one of the things I'd like you to do is take a look at the F stream after class and get it to print this properly without this line. I'll show you the solution at the beginning of next class. But that's something I'm going to leave for you guys to try.